2021 is now behind us. Let's talk about Xbox in 2022. I think it's fair to say that 2021 was a really good year for Xbox. While the consoles launched in 2020, in 2021, they found their footing. Microsoft was able to get these consoles out into the marketplace, and availability is very slowly becoming a little bit easier to grab these consoles. While it's still not easier, it's still better than what it was. And they also launched many premier titles like Psychonauts, Flight Sim, Forza Horizon 5, and Halo Infinite, and don't forget Age 4 either. A bunch of titles came out the door, and Microsoft finished strong in 2021. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today, we're here to look into the future, because we already know some of the plans that Microsoft has talked about previously but has not shipped yet, and then we can look a little bit further ahead about things that we expect to arrive in the year ahead. So let's get started with hardware. Now, Microsoft last year at E3 talked about new hardware already coming. Now, they haven't said when it's coming, but it's the Xbox streaming box, if you will. I don't want to call it a dongle because we don't quite know it's a dongle, although a lot of people assume it's a dongle. I'm not quite sure it's a dongle. But this device is going to allow you to stream cloud gaming to a TV or monitor that is not a full console. I'm expecting this thing to be a very low-priced device to get you into the Xbox ecosystem and enjoy cloud gaming. It's important to remember that cloud gaming is now generally available. You can already play it on your console, you can play it on your PC, your phone, pretty much any connected device at this point can access the cloud streaming service. And Microsoft has said, hey, we're looking to lower the price of entry for basically console-like gaming. I'm not going to say console quality, but console-like gaming on a TV that does not have a Series S or X hooked up to it. And so that device is coming. Microsoft has not announced a shipping date, but they did announce that they're building it, which typically means that it's arriving sooner rather than later. Now, given the supply constraints with literally everything in the world at this point, I'm not expecting it to, well, I think some people thought it was going to arrive in the second half of this year, of 2021, but I think 2022 might be more than likely at some point as Microsoft looks to get these things out the door. Also, things that are expected on the hardware side in 2022, there's going to be a bunch of new custom Xboxes. Now, a bunch can be subjective how many that is. We've already seen Microsoft experiment with this with limited, like one-of-one consoles that now get, shipped away as prizes for basically social media games. But there's also things like the Halo Infinite console. I expect Microsoft to continue to, push down this path, because the Halo Infinite one, first off, it's sold out right away. I would expect them to continue to do that. I hope that we will start to see more customization on the Xbox Series S as well, because that platform looks ripe to be customized. But obviously the Xbox Series X has basically four sides that act like billboards based on the way the console is created, and so be on the lookout for things like that. Now, the other question too is, are we going to see the Elite Series 3 in 2022? I know that Microsoft is working on this because the Series 2 is outdated at this point. It does not have the updated schematics, if you will, of the controller that ships with the Series S and X. Remember, that has a share button. The Elite Series 2 does not. Microsoft has updated the controller and pushed out the software update that does allow it to have that DLI, or the dynamic latency input, which makes your controller faster and better, but we're still lacking that share button, which is a pivotal point for Microsoft to update the Elite Series 3. Will that arrive in 2022? Not fully convinced yet, but it should be arriving at some point as Microsoft looks to capitalize upon that high-end hardware premium segment that has sold typically pretty well. I know a lot of people probably don't remember this, or may not, whatever, but Microsoft execs initially thought the Elite Series controller wouldn't sell at all because it was too pricey. This was many years ago. And so obviously it has continued to sell well, and it is due for a refresh with the Elite Series 3. Now, on to the software side. We know that Microsoft is going to continue to push dashboard updates. That is just something they do every single month. So we're going to get those iterative updates. But something else that Microsoft on the software side has talked about but is not shipped yet is they said that xCloud, or cloud gaming, is going to be coming to TVs. They announced at E3, they said Xbox is working with global TV manufacturers to embed the Xbox experience directly into the internet-connected televisions with no additional hardware required except a controller. And so keep in mind, Microsoft has not actually, we haven't seen this materialize in any TVs yet. But in the next couple weeks, CES will be happening in Las Vegas, or virtually for most of us. And so that would be a critical time for these things to be announced. Xbox Game Pass included with I would expect Samsung. Microsoft already has a very good relationship with Samsung, especially on the mobile phone side, and it would not be surprising to see that move over to the TV side, where Game Pass or Xbox on Samsung TVs is out of the box. Microsoft has already said this is going to be happening. We're just waiting for it to arrive. Many TVs will be announced at CES, and this seems like the perfect time for something like that to be announced. So be on the lookout for things like that. I'm also expecting to see the cloud gaming to be expanded into new markets. Microsoft has been pretty aggressively pushing this out. Obviously, they're taking their time, and there's a lot of latency in data centers and regulatory concerns per each demographic or locale, I should say. And so I would expect to see Xbox Game Pass to continue to expand. I would also be curious to see if Microsoft and Apple will ever be able to figure out whatever it is, their little kerfuffle. And by say Microsoft and Apple, I mean, will Microsoft ever be able to get a native pretty much cloud gaming app onto the App Store? Right now they have to do this workaround. It's not super clean, and Apple is under a lot of regulatory pressure to make just relax some restrictions, and things that have come out of court cases during the last year have really emphasized that it's not Microsoft who can't make this happen. It's Apple just straight up blocking them from enabling this type of experience. So that workaround, will it be relaxed in 2022? We can all hope, because it's just better for the end user. But again, it's over to Team Apple to figure that out. Also, I would fully expect the Windows app for Xbox to continue to expand and evolve to be more Steam-like. We saw some changes late in 2021 that allowed you to choose where you can save games and make it a little bit more customer friendly. And I fully expect that experience to continue into 2022. Microsoft has big ambitions in the PC space for this type of an application, and they really are trying to make it a reality. Moving on to games. Now, we all know that games are honestly probably the most critical part of the entire Xbox experience. They have good hardware, they have good services, they have good connectivity, but a platform without games, as Microsoft has learned over many generations, is not a platform at all. Now, 2021 was a banner year for Microsoft when it came to launching games, and 2022 has many highlights as well. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but they've got games like Replaced, Redfall, and Starfield that are really driving a lot of interesting hype. I'm really interested in Starfield for many reasons. I think many people here are too. But do not forget about Replaced. I think this game might get slept on just a little bit. It's a side-scrolling, but go watch the trailer, because just look at some of the graphics from this. I think there's some really interesting dynamic lighting, and it's while it is a typical side-scrolling game, something feels just genuinely a little bit different about I don't know if it's the visuals or the gameplay that we've seen so far. And so I'm really looking forward to that as well, sort of a non-traditional FPS shooter, if you will, because that's typically what I play. But Microsoft has invested a lot in games, and this really just kind of dovetails into their overall strategy. We've seen a good look at how Microsoft plans to position larger titles for the second half of the year. They knew that September through roughly November-ish timeline is critical for launching blockbuster games. That appears to be the best time of the year when you look at what happened last year, where they tried to launch Halo Infinite during that timeline, but we see things like Call of Duty, because that is how Vanguard is. But then we also saw Battlefield and a couple others launch in that window, which is when they like to launch their AAA games, which means that the springtime gets different types of titles, which is probably why Replaced is being launched in that period. But again, I think it's a super interesting title, but I'm really curious. I think this year, now that Game Pass will be really come into its own on the next generation hardware, or I should say current generation hardware, we'll get a better look at Microsoft's cadence for all of their upcoming games. That has been the big key. When you have a service such as Game Pass, you have to keep adding fresh content, which means there needs to be an optimal strategy of when and how to release games. We got a good flavor of that in 2021. In 2022, I look to better understand Microsoft's true cadence, because that should give us a better sort of look into the future about when more additional titles or big branded games will be launching on the service based on the patterns that we see between 2021 and 2022. So that it's looking interesting. Also, I fully expect partnerships to continue. Microsoft has done some interesting partnerships. First off, they've done the mini fridge, which you may be familiar with, but we've also seen collabs with Adidas for shoes, also Gucci for a ridiculous suitcase and a custom Xbox. And so I fully expect Microsoft to continue to doing this. They found some good success with this type of stuff. And I don't necessarily mean the mini fridge or just the shoes, but I mean in general doing these one-off partnerships where they do a limited edition run of Xbox branded content and material has really helped grow their fan base into new categories who may not typically want to be associated with, hey, I'm a console gamer, but then look at these shoes, I'm also there. You've got coats, you've got a suitcase, you've got everything else. And so these partnerships have shown to be an interesting beacon of success for Microsoft, not necessarily from, hey, we're going to grow a bottom line massively, but really growing their fan base organically with these types of products. So I fully expect those to continue. And then there are the acquisitions. Microsoft they've bought a lot of companies over the year, and Phil Spencer has said, hey, we are always open to acquisitions when the timing is right and things feel good and it's a good fit for a company. He said they're very interested in casual style games because they do have a pretty heavy portfolio of first-person shooters, and then they've got racing games with Forza. They do have Minecraft, and Minecraft is just a phenomenal success for them, passing 1 trillion, I think, minutes viewed on YouTube or something crazy like that. And so they're always looking forward for those acquisitions. Now, they obviously made the big Bethesda acquisition, and 2021 was not a huge year of acquisitions for Team Xbox. I think a lot of it was waiting to see how these big acquisitions play out, because Microsoft has to justify spending that kind of money on these studios for their game service known as Game Pass. And so they got to make sure the numbers sort of match, what they're doing here. And so I don't know if we're going to see any major acquisitions in 2022. They are incredibly hard to predict because they can fall, two parties can agree on a pricing and then shareholders of the company be like, nah, we're not going to do it. And so these things fall apart for many, many different reasons, but acquisitions are always on the agenda. Now, if I were able to create a wish list of things I would like to see in 2022, and this is going to follow a very specific theme. I already talked about the Elite Series 3 controller, which obviously seems very plausible, but there's also, I think, expansion in the Elite Series. Microsoft knows that they have very dedicated fan bases. I mean, they're paying top dollar for the Series X, and they want that type of performance. We already know the Elite Series controller sells pretty well. I'd love to see an Elite headset come out. We've already seen the Xbox headset that came out this year, and it's a good value for 99 bones or dollar dues or one mini fridge unit. It's really well priced, and so I think Microsoft has hopefully found success with that. But I'd love to see an Elite Series headset, and what could they do to make it elite? Honestly, the soundstage of that headset, while it is a good value, the soundstage is not up to what I would like, and so I do not use it on a daily basis. But I think an Elite style headset would absolutely cut the grade. I'd also love to see Microsoft expand more into the PC peripheral stage. Now, Microsoft has a rich history of building PC peripherals. Mice, there's one the box for one. This is the recycled mouse that they have, the Ocean mouse. They have built PC peripherals for years. I would love to see an Elite Series keyboard and mouse combo. Microsoft get into the true mechanical switch game for keyboards. We see Corsair, Razer, all of these companies have great success building keyboards. Microsoft could very much venture into that with an Elite branded gaming keyboard and mouse, and I think that would be a good complement to their Elite lineup and build it up as an actual brand inside of their own brand. So those are sort of things on my wish list. Obviously, there's studio acquisitions I'd love to see them make, but from a hardware perspective, that is what I would love to see Microsoft do in 2022.